Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Kravitz. I'm director here at the UC Center Sacramento, and it's great to welcome you all to the Undergraduate Research Showcase. It's really, we should say the Undergraduate Research Policy Showcase, because one of the focuses of our entire UCCS program is to emphasize the point that policy really matters, that rules, regulations, legislation, decisions that are made in the public sphere really influence how well people live. So you're all part of that, and you're contributing our knowledge regarding how to do things better. So we come together today to celebrate and to express appreciation. We're celebrating your accomplishments as students. Many of you probably discovered that you were able to do far more than you ever thought you could, and we're really proud of you for that. And we're also very appreciative of your internship host for providing the experiential learning opportunities, which are so essential to the UCCS experience. So thank you very much. Thanks for being here. And we look forward to the next hour of presentations.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. So the format today will be that each student will present. After the student presents, we will take one question from the internship host site. If there isn't a question from the internship host site, then we will turn the question over to our academic team. We will have an open Q&A at the end of our session as time permits. And with that, we'll go ahead and start with our first student presentation today, Luke Benson, who interned with the Fair Political Practices Commission this term.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, that looks great.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Luke Benson. I studied the effects that the California Transparency in Supply Chains Act has on consumer behavior. This act was passed in 2012, and it mandates that corporations operating in California disclose their methods to address the use of forced labor in their supply chains. I wanted to answer two questions. First, does the disclosure of forced labor decrease consumer willingness to buy products? Second, are more transparent corporations viewed more favorably than less transparent ones? I used Nestle and Hershey as my two examples and scored each using specific indicators from the Act. You can see the raw scores from figures 2 and 3. I hypothesized that disclosures would decrease favorability overall, but that companies with more transparency would be viewed more favorably. To test this, I designed a survey in which I asked participants how willing they were to buy from each company, both before and after presenting them with my transparency score and each company's disclosure statement. Figures 4 and 5 show a visualization of the change in favorability for each company. In line with my hypothesis, overall favorability dropped for both. Participants also became less willing to buy from Nestle than from Hershey. There was an increase of 13.6% of participants who indicated that they were unlikely or extremely unlikely to buy from Nestle after viewing the disclosure. Contrast that with Hershey, who only experienced a 7.3% increase in unlikeliness. The higher likelihood from more compliant corporations indicates that businesses may be able to recuperate potential losses by increasing transparency. What we don't know is if this correlation actually manifests in the store, which is why I propose studying actual buying habits in the future. My further recommendations would be to include disclosures on advertising. By increasing the presence of disclosures, I think that we could increase consumer awareness even more.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Luke. And so if there was a question from the Fair Political Practices Commission, if you can just go ahead and raise your hand, I can go ahead and unmute you on our end. All right, and if not, a question from the academic team, if you can go ahead and raise your hand, I can go ahead and call on you. Thank you. Great, Professor Butters.
Hey, Luke, great job here. Professor Butters, Paul 195 here. So I really like this presentation. I was just kind of curious about your thoughts on whether or not you think you've uncovered something that's maybe consistent across all businesses maybe, or is it something that's kind of unique to Nestle and Hershey? Because when you were talking about doing Nestle earlier in the quarter, I was just thinking about how much bad press Nestle's had the last couple of years. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that generally. Thanks.
Yeah, so I chose both of these because they both had bad press and they've both been known to use forced labor. But I do think that it would remain consistent across corporations because we're presenting the consumer with a disclosure, which specifically states that whichever corporation we're talking about is engaged in like nefarious practices. I do think that the presentation of that disclosure is necessary for them to even start thinking about that, though, which is why I was suggesting for future research that maybe we start putting disclosures on advertisements or something else to sort of increase consumer awareness, because I don't think the average consumer is aware of this. I know I wasn't when I started researching it.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke.
Great. Thank you, Professor Butters, for that question. And a great presentation today, Luke. And so our next student is Brianna Bustamante. And she interned this term with the UC Davis School of Education and Professor Heather Rose.
All right, hi everyone, my name is Brianna Bustamante. My home campus is UC Riverside, and I am currently studying political science, English, and law. So my research project is on the incumbency advantage in California school board elections. When looking at the US House of Representatives and their election rates, one can see how on a larger scale election, there are high re-election rates. This ties into smaller, but equally as important school board elections, where we can see the incumbency advantage trickles down. This is very important considering that in the state of California, there are over 6 million K-12 public school students governed by these school board policies. In order to answer the question of incumbency advantage in a school board election, I took a look at election outcomes for school board members published by Sacramento State each year. I analyzed the data of election results from the years 2009 to 2019 and compared incumbent versus non-incumbent candidates. The data is an analysis of California and school board member candidates for each year broken down into percentages. What I found was that there are significant differences in incumbent re-election rates in comparison to first-time candidates. In the bar graph, we can see how there is an overall 78% average of incumbents winning an election in comparison to non-incumbents 43%. When looking at over time data, there is a consistent 20 to 30% difference in these election outcomes. As for recommendations, because an incumbent running for candidacy has an advantage and does not have to list prior school-related experience, we should take a look at this if teachers or non-teacher influence in governance has long-term benefits in the near future for our schools. Research shows that school board elections with relatively higher voter turnout are associated with high academic performance of students, as opposed to elections with lower voter turnout.
Great, thank you so much, Brianna. And so if there is a question from the UC Davis School of Education, if you can just go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, we'll go ahead and take the question from our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Brianna, this is Professor Quila. I just had a question about, kind of the relative re-election rates between, U.S. House of Representatives and school board elections. So obviously, we see that they're pretty high in school board elections, but obviously not as high as House of Representatives. I was just wondering if you thought of any reasons why that might be the case, or why we might see differences between the two elections and incumbents there.
Right. Well, off the top of my head, the reason why might be just because the U.S. House of Representatives has a higher voter turnout versus smaller scale school board elections. I also did some research looking into this. Apparently, when it's closer to a presidential election or main election, there would be higher voter turnout as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Professor Quila, for the question, and thank you, Brianna, for that great presentation today. And so our next student is Demetrius Eulenborough, and this term she interned with the UC Student Association.
I don't know why it's not up. Oh God. That would happen to me. Okay, put it here.
It looks like it said that it was the end of
Okay, let's see now.
So you might want to just do it from the beginning
Yeah,
start.
it's working. And all of a sudden now it want to act up on me.
Oh, we see it.
Okay, now we're here. And it's not sharing.
Just press the back button or press
Press
the
the
left
back
arrow, or if it's up and it says
Here.
end of slideshow.
Okay, under slide. So slide share.
Press like the left arrow on your keyboard or press like the back. It should go back to it then. Should do it.
This is weird. It showed earlier. So let's try again. I don't know what's going on.
It's showing at the end of this of their.
Okay, it's up. I have it up. There's a screen. Now here, share it. Share again. There we go. Can you see it?
Yes, we can go ahead and see it.
All right.
Maybe from beginning, yep.
Yeah, here we
There
go.
we go. We got it.
Oh my gosh. This is unreal. Let's do it again.
I think you're clicking after you share it, and that's having it go to the end then.
Yeah.
So now let's go here and share. Now share. Gosh, I'm taking up time.
That's okay. Why don't we leave it on this one then here? When we
There we go. I want to touch anything.
okay. Yeah, there we go.
Hello, my name is Demetrius Eulenborough, student at UC Riverside, and this is an analysis of AP exam performances. My questions are, how does accessibility to AP courses exam vary by region and student background in California? Are there any significant differences in AP test performances between counties and by demographics? The study will provide better insights about the lack of AP courses and how access to equal distribution undermines the quality of education. AP courses are commonly associated with increased college-going rates and are often considered as a boost to admissions in college applications. Research suggests that a difference of performance exists between AP and non-AP students. Funding per student has increased, yet California remains below the national average. Hypothesis: increased AP courses leads to higher college matriculation and better graduate outcomes. There is a correlation between the distribution of AP courses and school funding. My method, I completed an analysis of 14 California counties and demographics within a 5-year time period. LA County places in the middle with student success rates on AP exams. Ventura is nearly 1.5 times as likely to have a student pass their AP exams in LA County. My recommendation is to invest in collecting more accurate data around the student performances under longitudinal basis and support legislation and budget efforts in California, such as Assembly Bill 309, that aim to increase college readiness by expanding funding for districts and the use of A through G courses and AP exams. In conclusion, diversity and district demographics funding determine how a student performs. Therefore, access to AP course exams should be addressed and equally driven. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Demetrius. And so it looks like we have a couple questions actually from your internship host site. Oh, actually, Prashant's going to let Ashraf take it. So Ashraf Bashai.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Demetrius, for the wonderful presentation. I had a question about what other areas you might have come across that you think would help in assessing why there is such a significant gap in college matriculation, whether it's academic or otherwise, what your research has shown you and how we can work to address those.
So in my research, I noticed, I really want to address funding, but when you look at certain counties, and like I said, I only chose 14, there's a bigger range to be researched to find out exactly a better, I guess you get a better understanding of what schools, what school districts, what counties, what regions. We can even use states to see who is doing better. If we look at my figure 1, you notice that New York is doing very well as compared to California, which is ranging 20%, and then on the national average, and Utah and Idaho is under. So I think that, I believe that what we can do is we can look into what other counties are doing better with exams and how much opportunity is available for access to those exams, and look at other districts who are doing less, and see if we can pull that better. But it's more than just AP exams. There's a lot of other things that cause deficiency in college graduate outcomes from high school students. There are many perspectives, and I just, you know, it has to be, as I said, I need more and better research information, and maybe go further into it. Again, like I said, with more areas, and see what the differences that see what makes it different.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much, Asha, for the question. Thank you, Demetrius, for your great presentation today. And so our next student that's going to be presenting is Michelle Jerome, and she interned with the California Department of Education.
Hello, one second. Okay, so hi, my name is Michelle Jerome. I'm a UC Davis student studying political science, and I'll be presenting the research I conducted regarding student academic success in relation to representative diversity amongst public educators in California. When first studying this issue, I began to notice that throughout the United States, segregation within public schools has begun to increase. California highlights this issue as less than 30% of students identify as white, while Latino and Hispanic students are reported as over 50% of the overall enrollment. This outlines an issue with the diversity of public educators, as the majority of California's teachers identify as white, while Hispanic and Latino teachers are not even a quarter of the teaching force. So I researched in California how representative diversity amongst public teachers affected the academic performance of Latino and Hispanic students. I hypothesized that increased representative diversity amongst these educators would result in increased academic performances amongst Latino and Hispanic students. I first started by reviewing 9 school districts throughout California. From those districts, I then chose 28 high schools to analyze the effect that representative diversity had on Hispanic and Latino test scores. Although there is a slight relation shown at the district level, the relation at the high school level is much stronger. I specifically found that in schools with similar student to teacher ratios, as well as average revenue per student, when there was at least half as many Hispanic teachers per Hispanic students, there was an observable increase in test scores. Therefore, according to my findings, both local educational agencies as well as the state should be focused on encouraging representative diversity. My main policy suggestion is based on AB 520, which was introduced during this legislative session. AB 520 was proposed to support the retention of male teachers of color. Further legislation would be able to take this initiative further by specifying representative diversity, specifically by supporting Latino and Hispanic teachers. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. And so, and we have a question from Ellie, and I went ahead and unmuted you on our end. If you can unmute yourself on your end, that'd be great.
Michelle, you've been a fantastic part of our team this last semester. And so thankful to have you and appreciate the highlight of AB 520. Are there any other policy recommendations that you would put into play or suggest that be considered to address this issue of ensuring that there is representative diversity among teachers for the benefit?
Yes, so my main recommendation is putting pressure on LEAs to create a school climate in which got some blowers going through right at the same time. So my main recommendation is to put pressure on LEAs to create school climates in which are encouraging of representative diversity. Right now, a lot of Latino and Hispanic teachers have talked about a problem in which they don't feel supported when they're teaching and supported in their growth in teaching. And so right now that seems to be the biggest issue, stopping Latino and Hispanic teachers from becoming more prominent.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellie, for that question. And thank you, Michelle, for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter is Kinsen Huang, who interned with the Cal Asian Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kinsen Huang, and I'm from UC Berkeley. And my research topic is the comparison of the efficacy of ESL courses and English courses in California Community College. So my research question is, do transfer level English courses and their equivalent ESL courses have similar academic outcomes? And just a little bit of a background, and an ESL student will enter a community college starting from non-credit ESL to credit ESL to FLE or to taking developmental English and then to TLEE and TLE, and then finally they attain an associate degree or transfer to a four-year universities. And acronym TLU means transfer level English courses that was required to transfer to a four-year university or to attain an associate degree. And then TLEE is the ESL equivalent of TLE. And then FLE stands for ESL courses one level below TLE and TLEE. And then the topic is very significant because California is the state with the largest population of immigrants. And then community college is also for the institution to affordable institutions for immigrants to immerse themselves in American cultures and improve their English. And also the transfer level English courses is a requirement of associate degree and then transfer to four-year universities. And then a big background is that Assembly Bill 705 was signed in 2017. And then in it acknowledged the ESL is distinct from remediation in English courses. And then it also required that community colleges to maximize the probability that ESL students will complete transfer requirements in English within 3 years. And my hypothesis is that TLEE courses would have a better academic outcome for ESL students than TLE courses. And my methodology is that I check up the database of community college pipeline, and then I compare the completion rate of transfer level English for different colleges that either provide TLEE and FLE or just those who just provide FLE rather than TLEE. And then I have found that the completion rate of those colleges provide both TLEE and FLEE have a higher completion rate of the ESL students of transfer level English as shown in the figure 3. So my policy recommendation is that community colleges in California should expand the availability of FLE and ESL TLE courses in California community colleges, and also try to recognize the importance of ESL support throughout college education, and then to expand the availability of more available courses to apply the pedagogy of ESL courses, and then to encourage the co-enrollment of ESL and native English speakers. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Kinsen. And so if there is a question from the Cal Asian Chamber of Commerce, if you want to just raise your hand, I can go ahead and unmute you on our end.
I think the staff of Cal Asian Chamber of Commerce, they have a panel today, so they are not able to join.
All right, thank you, Kinsen. And so then if there's a question from our academic team. All right, Professor Butters.
Hey, Kinsen. Dr. Butters here for Paul 195. I'm curious about in figure 3 here. I see that you've got your averages there and just the yearly amount of colleges that are providing both FLE or the TLEE or just one of them, right? So I'm curious about that big increase from 2015 to 2018 or 2017, I'm sorry, in the colleges that are providing both FLE and the TLEE. And then that pretty big drop off in the in 2018 in the green line as well. I was just curious about what's the story behind that big increase and the big drop.
Oh yeah, I think one reason is that as shown in the figure 2 here, the green cells means the college provided both FLE and TLEE for the academic years, and you can see that there are less green cells than yellow cells. So I think the data of the colleges that provided TLEE and FLE is comparatively limited, so the data will be more fluctuated. And then also it's very interesting that one community college called Foothill College, they cancel TLEE during 2018. So that also possibly like lower the average commission rate of those of the colleges provide FLE and TLEE. Yeah, that's my conjecture, I think. Yeah.
All right.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Butters, for your question, and thank you, Kinsen, for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter is Mika McKibb, and she interned this term with the advancement project.
Sorry about that. It looks like it's not giving me the option to share it.
Oh, there we go.
It worked out. Hi, everyone. My name is Mika McBib, and I did my research project on how the quality of prison education programs affect male recidivism rates in California. And recidivism is the likelihood of an inmate reoffending and or returning to prison after release. So historical evidence uplifts the efficacy of prison education programs in reducing recidivism rates, yet California has one of the highest recidivism rates in the nation and struggles to reduce it despite prison education programs being required in all 34 state prisons. So I sought to explore if there was a correlation between the quality of these programs offered and the recidivism in their respective counties. And I hypothesized that there was a negative correlation. I looked at male state prisons in 4 California counties and assigned each a quality value based on waitlist accessibility data for career technical education programs, with 4 being the highest quality and 1 the lowest. And I then looked at conviction rates by county for 1, 2, and 3-year conviction rates, which is data that we can then use to label recidivism. And some of the data did follow the predicted trend slightly, but one of the most notable pieces of data is that Sacramento County exhibited the highest reconviction rate across all 3 years, despite the Sacramento State Prison being of the highest quality. And even though the other 3 counties seemed to follow the predicted trend, it was only by about 0.1%. This may be due to many other factors that shape inmate experiences in reentry, like participation in other programs, and the fact that some inmates may not reside in the counties in which they are incarcerated in. But most significantly, I think this data reinforces what we do already know about these issues with the quality of these programs, this current ineffectiveness right here, which actually aligns with data and information from the California State Audit Report of the Department of Corrections in 2019. So as such, my policy suggestions include more evidence-based programming rooted in research methods, identifying new goals following the AB 109 2011 realignment that shifted which populations go to state prisons versus local ones, and appropriate funding for staffing and resources. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mika. And so if there's a question from the advancement project, you want to go ahead and raise your hand. I can go ahead and unmute you on our end. All right, and if not, a question from our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Mika. I know we've talked about this a bit, but you focus here on vocational technical education. I was wondering if you think these would apply as well if you looked at other education within prison systems.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I think it absolutely would be applicable. A lot of the research that we do see is actually looking at those 4 core prison education programs that I do have listed here, which is like basic education, college programs, GED, and literacy. And I think that the vocational education that you see with the career technical is intended to support individuals and inmates as they exit the incarceral state and they're able to re-enter into society. So I think both are definitely comparable in effectiveness if we choose to up the quality and really just set the tone through leadership to improve the quality of these programs.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Professor Quila, for that question. And thank you, Mika, for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter is Ali Mintzer, and she interned with the Fair Political Practices Commission.
Hello, I'm just sharing my screen. My name is Ali Mintzer, and I am a student at UC Berkeley. We're probably all aware of how dominant.
Ali, sorry to interrupt there. We only see a portion of it.
Oh,
like it was cut. It's cut off on the side.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me.
No problem.
Is it still cut off?
It's still cut off, yeah. I'm not
Okay.
sure why. Yeah, there we go. Looks great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry
perfect.
about
Thank you.
My name is Ali Mintzer, and I am a student at UC Berkeley. We're probably all aware of how dominant Amazon is in e-commerce, as well as its dangerous warehouse working conditions, its aggressive anti-union stance, and negative environmental impacts. This project, however, analyzes one incentive that cities often cite when they do welcome Amazon warehouses, which is increased sales tax revenue. In California, 1% of the base-wide sales tax is redirected back to cities and counties based on its place of sale. And online marketplace facilitators like Amazon are typically responsible for collecting these sales taxes. Based on anecdotes from city officials, I predicted that there would be no statistically significant difference between the sales taxes received by cities with Amazon warehouses versus cities without. I looked at the payments received by the first 5 cities to welcome Amazon warehouses in California and compared them to the payments received by 5 cities without Amazon warehouses, yet with similar socioeconomic demographics. The difference analysis confirmed my hypothesis. The study reflects the unequal bargaining power between municipalities and multinational corporations, as well as the lack of transparency as to how these sales taxes are allocated. Senate Bill 792 has been proposed in an effort to address this unequal bargaining power. This bill mandates disclosures of tax sharing agreements, since in some cases up to 100% of the sales tax received by cities is then redirected back to the corporations. Based on my findings, there should be increased oversight to ensure that cities with Amazon warehouses receive their anticipated sales tax revenue. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Ali. And so if there's a question from the Fair Political Practices Commission. And if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Kravitz.
Yeah, hi, thanks very much for the presentation. It was great. I was wondering if you could explain figure 2 in a little more depth. I guess my specific question was, wouldn't the shape of the curve depend on what the baseline tax revenue was for a given locale? In other words, a small place might have a larger increase in their tax revenues than a larger municipality.
Right. No, thank you so much for your question. That's definitely something I had to consider. With these 2 groups, the group with Amazon warehouses did receive more tax revenue before the warehouse opened. So there was that difference, and it's noted also in the gray line. But yes, that is something that unfortunately there's not a lot of transparency just in general as to how these sales taxes are allocated. And so that definitely it would be something for future research.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz, for the question. And then thank you, Ellie, for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter is Emily Picard, and she interned with the UC Student Association.
Hey y'all, my research project explored the impact of family empowerment centers on matriculation of students with disabilities in Southern California. Family empowerment centers established in 2001 connect families with free disability resources serving children 3 to 21. They offer daily social and life skills workshops, trainings that center on navigating special education services and, for example, Section 504 programs that outline student accommodations needed for academic success. FECs were created to mitigate socioeconomic barriers to disability resources that are not offered directly by school districts. It is estimated that special education funding must double in the next decade in order to meet the needs of students with disabilities, even though Figure 1 demonstrates that they have the lowest average percentage of college readiness in comparison to any other demographic of students statewide. Socioeconomic need is concentrated in Southern California, as demonstrated by free or reduced lunch meals. Therefore, I compared the matriculation rates of students with disabilities who have socioeconomic need in San Diego, which is served by an FEC, and Riverside, which is not. These counties serve similar numbers of students overall and had comparable graduation rates of students with disabilities with socioeconomic need in the 2017-18 reporting year. So I found that San Diego County has a higher percentage of students matriculating to institutions of higher education than in Riverside. We also see that there's a higher amount of socioeconomic need in general in Riverside, so that could be a contributing factor. Also, a lot of the education data is protected, so this doesn't include people who are undocumented, students that are undocumented, as that is protected data. So I would recommend that California fund child development programs in counties that do not currently have them to address this achievement gap of students with disabilities. Since special education programs really only serve students to the extent to the until they graduate, they don't often. But FECs and other sort of child development programs extend far beyond that, and students who are currently attending college could receive resources, support from those resources. As we can see, overall decreases in overall attendance contributes to defunding of special education program. And I know Michelle mentioned like this resegregation of the education system, where socioeconomic status is playing into and contributing to disparities in achieving their academic success. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. And so, and I see there is a question from the UC Student Association. So Parshram Khosravi.
Thank you, Cindy. Hey, Emily, it's been such a pleasure having you and hosting you this past summer term. My question for you is, I know that as you were doing this research project, there was particularly a lot of, one of the things we found quite a lot was that there wasn't a lot of research, there wasn't a lot of data consistently as an issue that came up. What would be some of the next steps, next areas where you think it would be good for researchers, for future research to be focusing on as far as this issue area is concerned?
Thank you for the question. So I definitely feel that there needs to be more recent data, a more recent studying of the efficacy of the current special education funding metric. It has been a big change in how California delegates and distributes funding so that they could bring most school districts up to 106. It's like 625 per student funding for special education. But really, when you're doing research, you're not really getting a feeling of how what the amount of money that a student receives for special education funding, how that will make them succeed or not succeed. It's mostly just flat, this district receives this amount for this student. So I feel like there should be more of a connection between how resources are being put towards seeing through to the success of students in districts. But then also I feel that in general, there needs to be more focus on community, family resources and support, because they're the first people who are able to recognize if their student needs disability services. So I feel like there needs to be more of concentration on education as well for families and communities.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Parshram, for that question. And thank you, Emily, for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter today is Alexandra Rizzo, and she interned with the Education Trust West.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep, looks great. Thank you, Alexandra.
Okay, perfect. So hi, my name is Alexandra Rizzo, and I'll be presenting my research on how California can close the achievement gap in English learners by implementing more targeted support programs. So there are 1,148,024 English learners, or also called ELs, in California's education system, making California the largest concentration of English learners in the country. Unfortunately, ELs in California continuously underperform academically than native English speakers. Within my research, I'll determine whether having more targeted support programs such as dual language programs in schools will improve academic achievement, such as California ELA assessments. So I identified 10 schools in the Los Angeles Unified School District that contain the highest EL population, and looked at EL's ELA scores who are enrolled in their school's dual language program compared to English learners' ELA scores who are not enrolled in their dual language program. As shown in figure 3, I found that on average, ELs enrolled in their dual language programs did better on the ELA assessment than those not enrolled in the offered dual language program. These results show the necessity of implementing or making targeted support programs, such as dual language programs, more accessible in California as state priority. Proper budgeting of federal funds and implementing more teacher education programs to make sure California Prop 58, which allows schools to utilize multiple programs, including bilingual education, will improve English learner success.
Great, thank you so much, Alexandra. And so if there was a question from Education Trust West, you can go ahead and raise your hand. I can go ahead and call on you and unmute you.
Unfortunately, she had to step out because she had a meeting at 11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right,
so
well then a
she's not
question
here.
from our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, I just had a question about, in terms of you mentioned kind of federal and state things can be done. I was just wondering if there are things that, individual schools could do to help, kind of augment or help kind of alleviate some of these issues in this way, or, are there other things besides, relying on, obviously things with federal issues, unlikely to have support necessarily coming from there anytime soon. So I'm just wondering what else could be done, on the ground to kind of help these things.
Yeah, so I think on an individual school level, it's harder. We have to look at more of like the school district itself. Like if we're looking at like LAUSD, we have to make sure that that parents and teachers that we advocate that they receive the assistance that the schools need, because there has been issues with funding not going to these programs that they're supposed to go to for higher needs students like ELs, to create like more like classes to help with teacher hiring. However, it's not being distributed as evenly as it should. So I feel like if we're talking more like singular like school levels, that they should make sure that they hold their school districts accountable, which also starts with educating the population, parents, teachers, to advocate for their students and their children, if that makes sense.
Yes, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Professor Quila, for that question. And thank you so much, Alexandra, for a great presentation today. And so then our next student is Emily Thomas, who interned with the California Department of Education.
Thank you. So hi, once again, my name is Emily. Let me, 1 second.
Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, looks great.
Thank you. Let me just, okay. So thank you. Once again, my name is Emily Thomas, and I am a public policy student at UC Riverside. I've been interning with a great team at the Language Policy and Leadership Office. Access to arts education is a public health issue. In the last statewide survey on arts, Black and Hispanic 8th graders were least likely to have owned an instrument or been to a theater performance. Arts has been shown to have positive impacts on mental health, which is important for students of color's experiences. Through my research, I asked what determines access to arts education and what impacts does arts have on students' mental health. I hypothesized that as a percentage of non-white students increased, the number of arts classes would go down. And as the number of arts classes increased, student well-being would increase as well. I looked at 7 school districts and used data from the California Department of Education's DataQuest and the CA Create dashboard. So let's take a quick look at the figures to see what I found. So if you look at figure 1, you see a red line representing African-American students and a green line representing Asian students, and you see how they're kind of tilted, which shows that districts with higher percentages of African-American and Asian students had fewer access to arts. So if you take a look at figure 2, you'll see a yellow line representing the arts kind of go up, which shows that districts with more arts have lower rates of absenteeism and suspensions. And you see that's represented by the blue bars that kind of go down when arts goes up. And when we're looking at figure 3, you'll go ahead and see that dots are closer to the 20 to 30% tend to have a higher arts, which I found that 7th grade African-American and Hispanic students in districts with more arts reported lower rates of sadness. So moving forward, arts education should be required and accessible to all for the betterment of our students' mental health across California. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. And so if there's a question from the California Department of Education, if you can go ahead and raise your hand, I can go ahead and unmute you on our end. All right, Elena Fajardo.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for this work. In your research, when you interacted with different folks, did you find that those that were leaders in their school districts or in your research, that they had experience with fine and visual and performing arts in their backgrounds that made them successful?
Well, through my research, I specifically looked at just data from 7 school districts, but it did show that districts with more arts classes did have better rates for mental health for students. But in the future, I would like to speak directly to leaders and see what types and how many arts classes are in each specific school. So I would like to do that for further research. But thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena, for that question. And Emily, thank you so much for a great presentation today. And so our next student presenter is, and our last student presenter for our this session is Brady Thompson, and he interned with Capital Weekly.
All right, let me get my slides. All right, can you see it all well?
Yep, looks great.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Brady Thompson. I'm a political science and psychology student at the University of California, Merced. So for my study, I looked at the possible effects of public transportation access and voter participation in California. The main purpose of this study was to, again, look at any possible relationship, as well as propose policy solutions from a public transportation standpoint. A little bit of background. In the state of California, spending on public transportation has steadily increased in the past 2 decades. And from a research background, there's little to no research on this topic. So I'm going to talk about the implications of that a little bit more later on, but that is what I'm working with, and that's the background that I'm starting from. In regards to measures, so measuring public transportation investment, I made a per capita measurement of the expenses of each county to sort of normalize it across all the counties. And then voter turnout is a pretty traditional measurement of voter turnout. The only difference here is that I made a note to exclude voting by mail. This was because obviously voting by mail, you're likely not going to be using public transportation. So I didn't want that to confound or affect any variables. In figure 2, you can see that in-person voter turnout has been somewhat variable across 2010 through 2016. And so I'll talk about the implications of that next. So the results, there is a very weak but positive relationship between voter turnout and transportation investment. So most of the per capita investment of public transportation is pretty similar, as you can see in figure 3. Most of it comes to the $100 per person measurement. But voter turnout changed significantly across the 4 election years. And so what I found is a very weak but positive relationship between the two. The implications of this is that, number one, more research should be done altogether on public transportation and voter turnout. I was very surprised to find little to no research on the topic. And because there's a slight positive relationship, perhaps targeted or strategic investment in public transportation on voting days. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Brady. And so if there is a question from Capital Weekly, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, I can go ahead and unmute you on our end. All right, John. Oh, John, did you have a question?
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute myself.
Okay.
Brady, thanks for your research. I wondered if you had come across any campaigns or saw any evidence of political campaigns specifically targeting public transit customers. We've seen ads in BART, we've seen ads in various places. Is this something that's happening more? Do you know?
So I can't give a definitive answer, but what I can say is that there's from what I found, there's very little attention towards public transportation when it comes to voting. And so I haven't found any through academia, and I hadn't seen any sort of campaigning through, in the political realm. But great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John, for that question. Thank you, Brady, for a great presentation today. And so I'm just going to go ahead and just give a pause here so that we can go ahead and end the recording.